Welcome to another episode of the Resisting Beta podcast. I am so excited about this conversation today. I was introduced to David Lee through one of my favorite Facebook groups, the Great Man Within Facebook groups, and also one of my favorite podcasts. And here's some questions that you might have that we'll answer today. So, do you know what negative patterns are causing the issues in your current relationship or your past relationship? Maybe some of the things that keep happening to you and the common denominator is you. Where do they come from? How do you navigate past them? And several other awesome topics that we're going to dive into today. So David is the founder and CEO of Daring Deeply Life Coaching with his partner and fiance, Paige Stuart, also the co-host of the Daring Deeply podcast. He reads these awesome retreats for men. Mainly, his goal is to help men, women, and couples find freedom and healing and transformation from our past trauma and pain. And he has surpassed and moved past 2 divorces and now finally found his ideal partner from all of the work he has done in personal development. So, David, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. So appreciate the invitation. Great, fantastic introduction. I'm going to record that and then just put on that on my podcast. So that was fantastic. So appreciate you, my friend.
Hey, man, I am grateful to be here with you today. I know we're going to dive into a lot, so we'll get started. But what I'm really curious about before we get rolling is what inspired you to be in the men's health space? Why are you here helping men and serving men?
Yeah. The most simplest answer to that is I'm a dude. I'm a man. and navigating all of the life experience that I've certainly, as you've aforementioned, been married and divorced twice. Through multiple relationships in my life. And I've always been incredibly intrigued by the masculine experience in life and how it's so limited based on how much we are taught, what is considered culturally, societally okay to say and do and behave, and how really the ideal of masculinity in so many ways has been lost. And too often it's either swung far to one side to the overly macho, or it's been swung far to the overly passive and more feminized idea of masculinity. And so to find that balance and that harmony in the center somewhere there is my goal. Not only for myself, it's my own journey. As I heard one of my coaches say at one point, your very first client is always you, right? And so I am doing what I'm doing because I need the support. I need the help. I need the direction. And I've always said that I continue to learn the lessons in which I teach. And so when I am deeply experiencing what I'm going through my own personal development story and journey and healing, I'm able then to really espouse and bring that forth to the masculine, to men in which we serve, and really bring it to the world to provide a different perspective, a renewed perspective, a grounded perspective in what masculinity is really about.
So if you're talking to kind of a guy's a bit lost in the woods, maybe didn't have a father figure or a man to kind of help him learn what it means to be a man, how would you define masculinity, or maybe the before and after state of some of the men that you've seen, or your personal story of what is masculinity right now? Because I think that there's the toxic masculinity, which is the one side of the pendulum, right?
Yeah,
and then it seems like, there's a lot of people stuck on the opposite side too, because they don't want to be that guy, right? So how would you define kind of that positive masculine man, whether it be from traits or a story or whatnot?
Yeah. Great question. So I grew up with a dad who, from my perspective, was very much confused in that space too. My dad, although showed some what we define as deeply rooted, grounded masculine traits, he was also very feminine forward in so many ways of his life. And so I took a lot of that persona on in growing up. My dad was a classically trained ballet dancer in the 1960s and 70s, right? So we're talking, dance is deemed and looked upon very differently than it was 50 or 60 years ago. But my dad was a classically trained ballet dancer, which you think, oh my goodness, right? One, it's so admirable because the athleticism that goes into being able to do and to perform in those ways. And yet it's still deemed as incredibly feminine. And so he was navigating and very, very much, in so many ways, his own self-expression to me, it was very confusing to him too. And yet he was deeply, deeply and powerfully skilled, incredibly skilled in that particular area. And that was his career for so long, but it did shape his masculinity. And I learned from that, and it was very, in hindsight, incredibly confusing to me. And also I lost my mother when I was 2 weeks old. So I never knew my mother. And so the mother wounds that come from that loss also shaped, and what I've come to understand through my own inner work, is that I have spent the vast majority of my life trying to save women. Not support them, not lead them, but to fix them or to save them, right? Which had me lean deeper into my grounded, wounded feminine essence. And so for the longest time, I was the super nice guy. We probably have men listening to the podcast, watching the podcast right now, are like, yeah, I'm the nice guy and I keep getting shit on, right? And I'm trying to figure out what in the world, I thought I was supposed to be a nice guy in response to the toxic masculinity that is so present and that women want not to ever have in their presence, especially in the post Me Too sense of season now. It's really, and can be really confusing for men who are navigating maybe a dating relationship, but also in a long-term partnership or marriage, is really, where does the masculine land now? I can't be too nice, but I can't be too much of an a-hole, right? Mm-hmm. So where is that balance? So for me, it is truly learning and implementing, important, not just learning, but implementing the grounded structure of what the masculine means, which is power and strength and leadership and direction and logic and all the black and white of moving and conquering the hill and taking the hill and winning and all of those in a really grounded perspective, and not moving into the overly toxic side, which means control. It's not control, it's leadership, right? Mm-hmm. And for the masculine to step forward in a directive, in a leadership role, in a decisive role, is where the masculine is grounded, and to be there for his woman. Far too often, and I've learned this, was I was far too nice and trying to take care of and save the woman and be something that the women in my life didn't want, right? I wanted to be the nice guy. I wanted to be the one that they turned to. I wanted to win the hearts of the women in my life. And ultimately, I was attracting masculine forward women because of my forward feminine essence. So polarity, understanding masculine and feminine energy, the polarity was inverted. So my feminine energy coming forward was incredibly attractive to a masculine forward woman, the boss babe, the CEO, conquering the hill, climbing the ladder. Right? I was attracted to that strength and power because I was in my feminine, based on my experience in growing up. And so I've had to, just recently, over the past couple of years, begun to understand, wait a minute, that's completely inverted. And it's incredibly exhausting for the feminine when she is in her masculine forward energy. It's exhausting. All she wants, right? All the feminine wants is to relax and rest, rejuvenate, and simply be. Masculine do, feminine be. That's polarity. And that's ultimately how we're working with our clients, is to understand, masculine, what is the truly grounded, polarized masculine energy for the man to sink into? And part of that is to understand who he is outside of what the cultural and societal narrative tells him it is, which is what we crash into to help them understand that. And part of that is the healing process. Because so much of the trauma that the masculine faces is overrun. It's overridden. It's bypassed. I'm good. I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm not hurt. I'm over it. Yeah, me and my dad are good. We had issues, maybe, kind of, right? It's so difficult for the masculine to even express emotion because that is inherently feminine. But it's important for the masculine energy to dip into his feminine from time to time, to lean into that healing process, to begin to heal so then he can force his masculine forward to do all the things that his feminine woman, his feminine partner simply desires and wants, if that's how folks are identified. Wrong answer. Yeah.
Wow, man. A lot to unpack there. And some stuff hitting home for me, man. Like the white knight syndrome is kind of like you're explaining. Like, it sounds like we have a lot in common to where like feeling the need to just save women because you're the white knight. You want to be the knight, their knight in shining armor and solve all their problems. Right. But like, as let's say a guy's kind of early on in his journey, what are some like symptoms or problems they're experiencing in their life if they are outside of the pendulum, whether it be one way or the other? Maybe I'd say stay closer to the nice guy. Like, what are some symptoms that the nice guy is experiencing in his life, whether it be past relationships or current relationships, that have him kind of like not living his best life? Let's just put it that way. So,
yeah, as we described, it's a great question. As we described, the wounded masculine is looking to save his woman, his feminine, because that's what feeds his ability to feel like he belongs, wanted and desired. When in reality, his desire to be wanted, to be desired, has nothing to do with anyone else, most especially his woman. His woman's job is never, ever, ever to fix him, to elevate him, right, to make him better. But the wounded masculine says, if I save her, I know that she will be committed to me, and that drives my ego, my level of self-worth, because I didn't receive that from dad or mom or someone. Trauma, trauma, trauma. Right? That's trauma. And by the way, a short little note about trauma. We all have it. I have it. You have it, Andy. Everybody that's listening to us has it. So let's get over the fact that some people have deeper, more wounded trauma than others. The fact is, we know scientifically through so much data that says that trauma lives in our bodies. It lives in our cells and our tissues. It lives there until we release it. So this is not about mindfulness. This is not about thinking better. It's not about the power of positive thinking. Okay? It is about releasing the negative energy from that original traumatic incident, whatever it was, right? And it doesn't mean that we have to go to war and get PTSD from a foxhole. Right? It could mean trauma is, by definition, is a simple dysregulation of the nervous system. That's it. So it could be somebody screaming in your face. That's trauma. Obviously, we obviously know what physical trauma is, right? But the emotional trauma, the emotional wounds that come from that is so prevalent. I mean, it's within all of us. And so what we say is, you know what? I got trauma, you got trauma, we all got trauma. Let's get on the trauma healing train and let's go and fix it, right? So we create an environment in which let's normalize the fact that we experience trauma. Trauma is affecting the masculine in a deep wounded way, because what it's doing is he needs to feel validated, something that was missing from his childhood, missing from his 20s. And so he's relying on his feminine to provide that for him. When in reality, it's his job to provide it for himself. So the grounded masculine, the healing, elevated, mature masculine is not searching for a woman who wants to be saved. His job is to support her healing, not heal her, support her healing on her own journey and be there to lead her through the process, but never to fix her and never to save her.
What a transformation from the seeking outside validation from women to like validate him as a man, to the basic foundation of leadership. And I think a lot of successful, the guys listening to this podcast, you're successful, you're probably an entrepreneur, you're a professional, you've gotten stuff done in your life, and you're a leader in a lot of venues. But I've seen these same men struggling to lead their wife or their spouse or their girlfriend And I love that you mentioned like the attracting the boss babe kind of woman, because that is an interesting thing that I learned in my dating process, to where I kept attracting these women that they couldn't turn off their masculine energy, because they had to live in it in their work life, right? They had to live, and it was almost, they would test my masculinity in the relationship, where and they didn't do it necessarily on purpose, but it was just like, okay, hey, turn it off, right? Like, this is not your role. This is my role. And I sucked at it in the beginning. I was awful. So if you suck at it right now, like, give yourself some grace and forgive yourself, and like, let's put in some work right now. And we're already doing it. So this is awesome. What are some baby steps here that you did early on? I mean, you talked about personal development. How did that play into this whole journey? Maybe take me back to 4 years ago when you got introduced to it, maybe some aha moments, some paradigm shifts that you saw. Like, let's dive in a little bit back into that past.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say the watershed moment or moments for me in my healing, right, that began the journey to me truly understanding from a trauma-informed perspective on what I needed to heal, and then led me into polarity and understanding masculine and feminine energy, was the journey in which I had to heal my father wounds. So the reality is the vast majority of us men have father wounds in some capacity. And by the way, our father then had father wounds, and grandfather had father wounds. And we talk about trauma in the sense that trauma can be actually passed on through generations and can even skip generations. There's some powerful work out there that suggests that, and I won't get into the details, but that it's passed through the biology of who we are. And so it's super important to get a baseline and a standard like, look, here's the deal. I need to heal, and I have father wounds. And that's the capacity that I had to come to understand. I was angry with my father for a very long time. We had a very tumultuous relationship. Very much alike in so many ways. And so we butted heads. And as I grew, the relationship got a little bit more dysregulated. And I really never found the time. I was angry. I was disappointed. I was dysregulated. I was pissed. Why couldn't I have a life that so many of my buddies seemingly had, that's a whole other thing, what we see from the outside, because we really don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So a huge part of this was to begin to really look at my father, not as dad, but as my dad's first name was Lanny, Lanny, is to look at Lanny the man and begin to look at him as a soul, as a spirit, and not my father. And begin that slow process of really investigating and seeing, how did his story get to where it was? And that began a short journey of empathy for him, not as my dad, but as a man. And begin to understand, I get it. He had a masculine, forward, dominant mother. He had a very passive father. Kind of makes sense. Okay, now I'm beginning to understand his own path and why he chose. My dad was married 5 times. And why he chose continuously, speaking to your point, he was always looking for validation from a strong feminine presence to replace what he once had with his mother. Well, no wonder, right? So we clashed. I began to understand who he was. I heard a coach of mine say at one point during this process, during this journey for me, an affirmation that I repeated for 6 months straight, Andy, every single morning. This is the affirmation as I woke up. And I would speak to myself. And I would say, David, you are the very best of Lanny Lee, my father. You are the very best of Lanny Lee. And I would also say for it to my mother, too, as part of that healing process. You know, my mother's been gone 50 years, right? I never knew her. I never had a physical connection with her. Although through my work, I'm understanding, oh my gosh, I have so much more healing and understanding to do on that side. But for me, the watershed moment was the healing process with my dad. I lost my dad 5 years ago. I have a much better relationship with my father now than I ever did when he was living, because I've done continuous work to understand him as a man, understand him as a little boy, understand his own journey, understand his trauma, which he never, ever, ever addressed. Right? He continued, as the typical dude will do, bury it. Right? He lost my mother tragically, suddenly. 35-year-old woman. He just had a baby, me. Right? Suddenly gone. Right? Never, ever, ever talked about it. Ever. So there's a traumatic moment that shaped, obviously, our relationship moving forward. So for me to heal that was to understand him as a man, begin to understand through an empathetic lens. Oh my gosh, I get this. Not to excuse his behavior. This is important. Empathy is not excusing the behavior. It's simply understanding where he's coming from. And then begin to go into a compassionate role, which means bringing action to the healing. Compassion is empathy with action. Okay? And then I wrote a letter to him. I wrote a letter to him after he was gone, thanking him, asking for forgiveness from him because of some of the things that I had done in our relationship, and then telling him that I'm working on forgiving him. And I wrote this letter. I wrote specific memories that were so delightful that I had with him, playing baseball, watching Johnny Carson, all these fabulous memories, fishing, being outdoors, doing all of these wonderful things with him in this long letter. And then I read it on social media and made it a public experience. And that helped with the healing process. And now when I think of my dad, I was just having this conversation. It's not an accident. I was just having this conversation with Paige this morning. And how now when I think of my father, a smile comes over my face. I'm like, I miss that man. He was a good man. He did the best that he could. And he's also responsible for his behavior. Right. So it doesn't dismiss him and make him this angel, right? And say, oh my gosh, he didn't know what he was doing, so I'm going to excuse and pardon everything that we experienced. No. It's simply coming to a peaceful revelation and understanding that my father wounds are driving the fact that I am still stuck, that I still continue to date the same women with different faces, that I'm still stuck in my career because of the trauma related to my father wounds that I had neglected to ever understand and certainly never healed. I began to heal those wounds.
So it's kind of like the reasoning why, because I've heard people say where you kind of you marry the version of your most troublesome parent. So what you just went through there is like the why behind that statement that like connected just like so many dots there for me, and I'm sure a lot of the men listening right now. So what is the end result? Like, why would a man want to go through all of that hard work and dig up all that emotion? I mean, I was getting emotional a little bit when you talked about your affirmation, to where I felt my eyes well up, because that's super impactful. And I my relationship with my father, thankfully he's still around, but it hasn't been the greatest at times. It still is a bit tumultuous right now, but that leading with that empathy and those stories, that's so powerful, man. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate that. So what is at the end of the tunnel? Like, why go through all of that hard work? Why don't I just keep doing what I've been doing and like numb it, or just bury it deep down in there? Like, well, why not I like my comfort zone. I'm going to stick right here.
Yeah. And that's I talk with fellow coaches and fellow impact leaders and thought leaders, and this is the age old conundrum that says, I want to help the world, but most of the world doesn't want the help. Right? And I have these conversations with prospective clients, on calls, and I will be very forward and very direct and say, we will work with folks who are ready to do the work, right? And the simple answer to that is, there is a deep, deep-seated want and desire for more within the masculine. Always. Like we are the lion. We are always in pursuit. We are always wanting to conquer and be challenged by the next task, whatever that may be. It goes south though when the conquering becomes life, right? When the pursuit becomes life, when the woman becomes the pursuit that becomes life, right? Because it's really about what's the purpose behind the pursuit. What's the purpose? We've heard so many deathbed stories, haven't we? Of men who had everything, who seemingly had everything, the world by the tail, all the money, all the things, all the houses, all the cars, all the things, right? And so often money and success defines the masculine. And we go off the rails when it goes that far. And then we hear that deathbed confession that says, gosh, you know what? I worked my tail off my whole life and I've achieved so much. And yet the only thing that matters right now are the people that are standing around this bed, right? And what we've come to understand is to truly get to the heart of growth, transformation, and healing is the perfect place for the masculine to then continue to pursue his wants and desires. But what continues to block him in these really deeply, you know, how you experienced just now when I was telling that story, how that emotion came up. It came up for me because I was looking at you, Andy. The honest was I saw the emotion come over your eyes and I felt it deep within my soul. And I allowed that to be. I allowed that to happen. This is at the heart of the masculine, to feel that emotion and then to take action based on it. Mm-hmm. And the revelation of that is something we want to bring to the masculine to say, one, it's absolutely necessary to express your emotion. How it's done, that's a whole nother conversation, right? Because as we know, and I think I heard this on Dom's podcast, just about how women love to experience the emotion of their masculine partner, and yet it can go very south when it becomes complaining, bitching and moaning, whining, blame shifting, being the victim. When in reality, the sweet spot for the masculine, this is what I believe every masculine wants to drive him forward, is to be able to embrace and receive what's coming at him, all the challenges and all the difficulties, and my boss did this, and my mom did this, and my dad did this, and my neighbor did this, and all of that, and say, yeah, I receive it, I hear it, and now I'm taking action. So we need to feel it. We need to express it, and then come up with a solution to move forward. This is at the heart of masculinity. And for the masculine to only be reserved for the pursuit of money and things and women is an incredibly short-sighted way to look at masculinity. Incredibly short-sighted. In fact, I say this to men often, our clients, and I'll say this to women too, is my guess is, as I talk to them, my guess is, you don't want to be a liar, do you? You don't want to lie, do you? You don't want to be a liar, right? I'll say, and they're like, no, of course not. No, of course not. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be in that space. That the longer that you remain outside of your purpose, the longer that you remain outside of your grounded, infinite nature in your masculine, you are robbing the world of what you can bring to it to exact change and transformation and growth. In essence, you're lying. You're lying to the world because you are taking away what you could potentially bring to the world to bring change. Now, if that message doesn't resonate with someone, I can't help them, right? And you know this as well as I do. It's so hard because there's so many people to help.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they have to want to get there. And that's why we continue to push our message. You're pushing your message. I'm pushing my message to the world for the right people to hear the message to move forward. And for them to be ready to receive it.
Wow. That's a lot. This is awesome. So why can't men just do this on their own? Like I think that the lone wolf thing that the Great Man Within podcast group talks a lot about, it's really spoke to my heart significantly, because I have struggled to find male friends my whole life. Like my whole life. I still do. Like that's that study that I had listened to where 52% of men feel like they have no close friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we get used to that and we're like, well, I'll just figure it out on my own, but at some point in time you decided to get a coach. So like, why can't men just figure out this on their own? Because I think that like most men hear trauma and dealing with trauma, they picture themselves on a couch talking to a psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever. At that point in time, they think they're broken. But the paradigm shift that I would love to see before I leave this earth is that mental health and those sort of conversations, maybe not with a psychiatrist or psychologist or whatever, but they need to happen. And we haven't really touched on that, but we've touched a lot about trauma, but like can you navigate trauma on your own? And at what point in time do you need to ask for help to make sure you're not robbing the world of the best version of yourself? Because I love that story. It reminds me of a story where it's like when you leave this earth and you're met with the higher power or God or whatever your spiritual beliefs are, like you get seen the version of like who you could have been and who you are. And like most men, if you don't treat this trauma and you just choose to numb it or bury it deep down, those people are going to be two completely different people. And then like the impact you could have from dealing with this stuff, man, I love that. So let's dive in a little bit there.
Yeah. Well, the simple answer, and I'm very direct on this, is no one can heal their trauma alone. Now, is it possible? Of course, anything's possible. But why be the lone wolf when you can? And what we see is to provide a safe, secure, and challenging container. And when I say container, I mean a group of trusted brothers, not buddies, right? Buddies is who you go to the ball game with and have a couple of beers, and that's fine. They may be a brother too. But the brother is going to hold you accountable and ask you questions that matter. They're going to ask you questions about your marriage. So how is that going, right? How are you treating your woman? Because I know that was a struggle for you last week, right? Mm-hmm. Within the safe, secure, and challenging container tribe, if you will, of other trusted men who are on the same journey, can provide what we call a co-regulating experience. When we know just from science, from anthropology, from humanity, that we do better in groups. We survive better in groups than doing the lone wolf. Yes, it's true. As my dad once said, actually he said it a ton, if it's not done right, just do it yourself, right? Because then you have control over all that. Well, I learned that and implemented that, unfortunately, right? And I've spent a lot of my life being the lone wolf, or as I call the maverick, right? And like, you know what? I'm good. I can do this on my own. I can. One of the 10 guidelines of engagement, kind of our 10 commandments at Daring Deeply, our coaching practice, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. Can someone do it? Sure. But why? Why, when surrounding yourself with other trusted men along this journey can provide you, as we say, iron sharpens iron, right? That can elevate us at a much quicker rate. I once learned that coaching, in essence, is stepping into a time machine. Can you do this on my own? Sure, of course. It may take me a while. If I read all the books, listen to all the podcasts, and go to all the retreats on my own, sure, I'm going to gather some of that information. But when I hire someone, right, when I step into a community of men, when I hired my first coach, and my first coach was in a community of other men, I got to express, I got to share, I got to hear, I got to learn, I got to co-regulate. I got to regulate my nervous system. That's what we're really talking about. Co-regulation. Regulate my nervous system with other like-minded and like-bodied men who are on the same journey to say, yeah, man, I get that. I understand that. When we're alone, it's very easy not to move forward. Because who's holding you accountable? No one.
Right.
Just you. So it's a very easy way for men to hide. And we're really good at that. I don't know about you, Andy, but I'm really good at hiding. Really, really good at hiding. And I've spent most of my life hiding in plain sight. And I came to an understanding that I don't want to do this anymore. I had to make what I call a must decision. When I entered into a community of men, when I hired my first coach, I made a must decision as opposed to all the other should decisions I've made in my life. You know what I should do? I should lose weight. I should get to the gym. I should do laundry. I should cut the grass. I should be a better dad. Yeah, should never leads us anywhere. Must leads us down the road. When I made that commitment to hire my first coach and enter into a community of like-minded men, it was the scariest decision I've ever made. Not go to college, not have children, not get married, not get divorced, not start a business. The most terrifying and exhilarating decision I ever made was to enter into a community of men who were going to hold me accountable and ask me the tough questions, even when I didn't want to answer them or be asked them. This is why co-regulation, this is why being in a group of men, doing it not alone is so incredibly powerful. And it speeds things up. And let's be honest, we dudes, we want to move along. Let's go. Come on, right? We're always challenging. Our woman was like, babe, I apologized 3 times. Why aren't you over this? I got shit to do. Let's go. Let's go. And meanwhile, she's like, I'm not ready. I'm still in my emotion. I need to process, right? Side note, by the way. Side note. Men need, oh my gosh, I just forgot it. Women need time. Men need space to process, which is really difficult. That's dealing back with polarity and masculine and feminine energy. Men need space. We need to get in the car and drive around the block. Space to process. Women need time. And that doesn't necessarily match all the time. So it's important that we are with other men who need the space, right, to heal, to grow, to share, to express, to move forward, to conquer, to own, the strength to move forward and to grow.
So one of the things that I learned dating in my late 30s is that when I went to seek out coaches or experts, most of the books or content is essentially talking to men's base needs, right? If you do this, you will get more sex. If you do this, you will attract hotter women, which must work because these guys, there's a lot of them and all of that out there. And that is important, right? To where if you are in lack, and if you're not in a relationship and you aren't attracting women, then that is high on your needs base. But I want to speak to it for a second to where when a man does the work and shifts to his masculine energy, what is the end result from the relationship side of, like, let's say he isn't in a relationship now, when he does the work and shifts to his pendulum to the more masculine energy, like, what does that look like from just the base need stuff? Let's be honest here. That is a driving factor. If you don't have it, you want it, right? So let's just spend there for a second because I know we're approaching our time here, and so I'm curious about that, your perspective.
Great question. I'm so glad that you brought that, because basically what I heard Andy just say now is, let's cut the shit and get to the basics here. How do I get laid better, right? How do I make more money? How do I increase the proficiency of my business? Let's get to the black and the white and the logic of the masculine. So cut all the soft stuff and let's get to it. That's what I just heard. So here's the reality, and I'll just use my experience. When I began to enter into doing my own inner work, hiring the coach, being in a community with like-minded men, my revenue dramatically increased. I began to date more elevated women. I began to have much better sex. Now, here's the difference. That wasn't my goal. That wasn't my goal.
Exactly.
So when we are driving toward, oh, well, this is going to be the slot machine, right? If I put this in, crank the thing, I get sevens, triple sevens. Like, that's not the way it works. doing the healing, growing, transformative inner work, healing our crap from the past, generates the results because we are in our most pronounced purpose as a man.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with attracting a hotter woman, having better sex, earning more money, all the things that we want, the basic needs. But it is the direct result. It is the direct result because the more that we are centered and grounded and deeply rooted in our true masculinity, which takes all of the understanding, all of the knowing, all of the growth, all of the healing, right? That's what we don't understand. And that's why we want to take a magic pill.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
It's like looking at Peyton Manning, like, I wish I could make $100 million a year, but it's like, well, what if you invested 100,000 hours into throwing a football and footwork and lifting weights and your nutrition? Like, now I don't want to do all that stuff, but I want $100 million contract. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think that, like, so from making the choice of healing your, you know, because we may never heal at all, right? But taking the steps to healing some of, like, the biggest gaping, like, you know, throbbing problems, the consequences just might be more money, more sex, attracting more elevated women, and of course, living a life of abundance. But it's so hard to picture that kind of, like, pie in the sky thing when you're not there. Like, you look at other people, because I've been there. Like, you look at other people and you're like, oh yeah, he just must be, you know, he just must be the dude. I'm just not that dude, you know. I'm just going to be this and he's that, and that sucks, but this is where it is, and it's probably always going to be, you know, like that kind of like that woe is me victim mindset, which I have been there multiple times in my life, and it is okay to be there, but it's never okay to stay there, right? So you just might have the consequences of all those amazing things if you do this work, which I love that we're taking this to the next level of depth, because that was the one thing that pissed me off about diving back into being single. And I was like, oh crap, like, all of these coaches, all they're talking about, like, hey, say this one thing and you'll get laid more and attract 8s, 9s, and 10s, the supermodels and all that stuff. And I was like, I mean, that sounds nice, but like, all right, I want something more. Can I have more than that? Can I, and I love the fact that we're diving into the more of it. However, it's a shit ton of work, but it's worth it. Right? Like, the juice is worth the squeeze is what you're telling me here, David.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. And it's what's ironic about that is that the masculine is designed and crafted in the deepest roots of who he is to work, to do, to conquer, to rise, to be proficient, to be efficient, to be successful, whatever that means for you. And yet we look at that and go, nah, I'm good. Just tell me what's the easiest way to make the most money. Like, okay, right. That's a formula. I'm not interested in delivering formulas to men. I'm interested in developing and delivering processes.
I love that.
In which to say, how do I fit who I am in that process? Because there's some universal, someone once told me, some things are true, David, whether you believe them or not. And I was like, oh, shut up.
Damn it.
Yeah, damn it. Right. So the reality is, look, if you want more fulfillment, if you want a hotter wife, whatever, right? If you want more money, that is such a banal way of looking at life. Let's elevate that to where that is, as you said, I love this. It's the bonus. It's the cherry on top. It's the consequence of doing the work. We're going to do work anyway. We're designed to do that. So let's put our purpose and our force into the work that really matters, that's going to generate results in all facets of our lives. Let's do that as opposed to shortchanging ourselves and just being the hot dude who attracts a hot wife. I want more, and I want the world, and I want the masculine to want more.
Okay. So you just said a word that I love. One of my favorite words is process. So as we wind this conversation down, I end all my episodes with
with baby steps. Let's give the men listening to this, because we've talked about a lot. And one thing that I have tried and screwed up on is I listen to something like this and I try to implement it all. And then I fail miserably. And then I beat myself up over failing miserably, and I create this vicious cycle. So anyway, let's get them some quick wins. So what would you say, like, okay, we've shared this topic. They're excited about kind of like getting the ball moving. Maybe they're not quite ready to hire a coach yet, but like, what would one thing that they could do over the next, let's say 7 days, right when they wake up in the morning, where we can get them some quick wins over the next 7 days, or next month, or whatnot? Like, what would you say would be the one thing that they should do first thing in the morning, or every single day, maybe before they go to bed, that would help nudge them along on this journey? Like, you're the professor, you're giving them a homework assignment. Like, I want to get these guys feeling good.
Yeah. A couple of things that come to mind. Because this is all about making decisions. Am I going to decide to do this? Am I going to decide to hire a coach or be better or whatever? So the common decision-making process is to have, do, and be. I have to have the money. I have to have the hot wife in order to do something about it, and then I can be the millionaire. The reality is, it's be, do, have. So it goes back to the affirmation that I was expressing earlier, right? Is those affirmations, when we wake up, I am the very best of my father. I am the very best of who I want to be. I am that, right? It's not lying to yourself. It's not being toxic positive, but it's manifesting and it's being in who you desire to be. To say, I am this. I'm the very best of my father. I'm the very best of my mentor. I'm the very best of my coach, whatever the case may be. So there is something that can be said. Write it on your bathroom mirror, right? I'm the best at this, right? And I guarantee all the men that are listening to this, they've been told at one point, maybe it was this morning, maybe it was last night, that they're really, really good at something. Whatever it is, it may be the job, it may be whatever the case may be, is to repeat that, because you will be that. The goal, so if I want to be a world-class international speaker on stages to reach billions of people, I am that now and on the journey to move in that direction. Right? Secondly, I'll say this. You are, and you've probably heard this too, Andy, and the audience has heard this too. You are the average of the 5 people closest to you. You are the average of the 5 people closest to you. So to do an inventory over the next 7 days of all the men, women, mom, dad, whatever, who you would deem as closest to you, because you become that, right? You were talking about, living in the doldrums, and I tried this and I'm going to stay there. And we emulate who we're around. Who are you choosing to spend your time with? We've had clients who have left jobs because it was such a toxic environment and they could no longer stay there, simply because of the environment and the people in it. They had to elevate themselves. As I've often said, you cannot continue to fish in the same pond and catch different fish. So to do an inventory with these 3 questions, I have 3 questions for everyone. When assessing the people closest to you in your life, gentlemen, okay, do they make you happy? Do they bring you joy? Okay? Do they bring you happiness? Do they bring you joy? Okay? And do they make you better? And number 3, do they ask you questions about the purpose of your life and the direction of your everything that you've ever wanted? They're asking questions. They're inquisitive. They're encouraging you to move forward by investing in you. They care about who you are. So again, the 3 questions. Do they make you happy? I've got buddies in my life who make me laugh my ass off, but they don't make me better. And so guess what? They stay out here as far as my boundaries are concerned. Okay. Do they make me better? I have coaches who make me better, but you know what? They don't necessarily make me happy, because I'm like, damn it, I don't want to do that. And there's a necessary and a secure boundary there between our, And then I have people who ask me the really important, loving, generous questions. Hey, bro, how you doing? Right? Really asking me how I'm doing, not just how you doing, news, sports, and weather crap. but really asking, so I know that you're doing this, and so how is that working for you, right? Here's the deal. If you find people around you who answer all three with a resounding hell yes, you are going to move forward. Because you're around these people who are doing it anyway. So my encouragement is, do an inventory, gentlemen, of the people closest to you. Do they make you happy? Do they bring you joy? And do they ask you purposeful questions? And the people that don't answer yes to any of that, it may be time to move on. And that can be really hard. But if we elevate, and the people around us are continuously trying to keep us where we used to be, we will never transcend to who we were supposed to be, ever. That's why I have buddies, I have friends, right, who are no longer consistently in my life. It's not because we had this sappy breakup and I told the dude to go, you know where. We no longer had anything to talk about. They're here, I'm here. And that's okay. That's okay. It's hard. It's difficult. Oh my gosh, I've had a buddy for 25 years and they've done everything. Loyalty is incredibly overrated. We are never to remain in a relationship because of loyalty, ever. Ever.
Ooh.
It's an excuse. It's an excuse. Well, he's done so much for me. She's done so much for me. Well, my dad's always been there. Yes, but he's an asshole. Then why are we in a relationship with him? Well, because he's my dad. Oh, no. Oh, no. No one, by the way. No one is allowed to be in relationship with you simply under obligation, neediness, or because they want to. This goes back to the whole, oh my gosh, who am I spending my time with? So answering those questions, I could go on and on and on. But answering those questions is going to help men go, okay, if what David Lee said, that the people closest to me are affecting me and keeping me, right, from moving forward and really living the life that I was designed to live, it's time for me to assess that. It's time for me to understand that. And that conversation with yourself can be incredibly difficult.
So, wow. Yeah. So I love that. And this is like, I'm getting so much out of this personally. So I really appreciate what we've done here today.
Thank you, Andy.
So so one choice they have, because my life, I'll be honest, like I don't have those 5 people. Like my 5 people are probably all people I listen to on podcasts, but that doesn't qualify for all 3 questions. So the choice would be, you might need to join like a mastermind or go to a retreat and that kind of stuff, which is something that David and Paige put on with their men's retreats. I think there's one coming up. You had on your website is like September or October down in Nashville.
Yeah,
did I have that right?
Absolutely, Andy. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, Paige and I, we host men, women, and couples in different capacities in a retreat experience. And the one I wanted to talk about specifically for our masculine audience is we do have a men's retreat that's happening September 28th through October 1st here in Nashville. And so we bring men from all over the country or world, right, come into Nashville and we spend 3 days together developing, understanding, healing, transforming, growing everything that we were talking about today and much more, right? But to truly understand purpose, to truly understand what masculinity is, how do you really lead a woman? And let's just cut to it. How to have great, better sex, right? Because of the implementation of the tools and strategies in which we teach at these events. And we also give an opportunity for folks to learn more about what we do and to work with us one-on-one outside of that and beyond that event as well. So again, men's retreat, September 28th through October 1st here in Nashville. If you're interested in knowing more about that, we've got a couple of slots still open. And I'd love to have a conversation with you and see if it's a good fit. We can go from there.
And then if people want to get a hold of you, have other questions, learn about that retreat, just kind of what are some spaces that to reach out to find that? Was it your Instagram? I think I saw your link tree on, or is it your TikTok channel, or all of them?
Sure.
Where's the best place to continue this dialogue with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You will find our most elevated, grounded presence, our most illuminated presence, if you will, get to really know David and Paige on Facebook. So we have a private Facebook group. called Building Real Love in Real Life that helps men and women and couples and everyone to truly understand so much of what we talked about today. And then you can find different ways in which to connect with us on Facebook. Do have an Instagram, and then TikTok is a relatively new platform for me, and I love it. So I've got quick, pointed, powerful little videos there that you can tap into and learn more. But Facebook is really kind of our cool. Home base. So come and find us on Facebook. David Lee, Lea is the last name. Lea. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm part of that Facebook group. I just joined it. I follow him on TikTok. I'm a huge TikTok guy. That's where I got my my resisting beta from. It is my social media of choice because I get to laugh and be a little bit inappropriate, and it's super entertaining. It is by far my favorite thing to consume. And David's got some great content out there, so follow him. Help his algorithm out to help get his message out to more men out there, because God knows we need more of what we're talking about today. And and David, I got so much out of this conversation today. I really appreciate you being here. I want to honor the work that you have done for yourself. And I am so excited to see you on million-person stages or hundreds of thousands of people getting your message out there, because I believe that the more we can impact the leaders of this world, men who are willing and open to make change, open to being vulnerable and opening their past to work on it, to create a ripple effect, to change this world. Because I think if we change one family at a time, we can change the community, we can change a country, we can change a state, and by just helping men be more impactful leaders and accomplish this mission that us at Resisting Beta are so passionate about, of eliminate or cutting male suicide down in half by 2032. And those men need you. They need you, and they need the men listening to this right now to do the work, to make the hard choices, to stop numbing it and bearing it down with outside substances and that kind of stuff, and take action. So this is your call, men. This is your call. Get around better men. I need to do it. I'll be doing it with you. I think this is a good kick in the pants for me to finally join that mastermind or hire that coach, because it's something that's where I've gotten the best results in my professional life. I haven't really done it on a personal side. So I really appreciate your time, David. Any last thoughts or gold nuggets of wisdom before we leave the men for the rest of their day here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thank you for saying that. I appreciate the feedback, appreciate the invitation, and I love your passion, Andy. And I agree with you. It's one thing I will say is, and I've said this so many times, and I'll continue to beat this drum: heal the man, heal the world. Heal the man, heal the world. And you can replace world with family, kids, wife, business, whatever the case may be. Imagine, I'll end on this. Imagine if Vladimir Putin would heal his trauma. Imagine who that man would be. And imagine the millions of lives that he's affected, his decisions have affected, would be vastly different. I've often said, if Vladimir Putin had a powerful feminine essence to help him make the decisions and to heal his father wounds, to heal all of that, imagine what wouldn't have happened, right? Now I'm using what we're talking about on a global scale, right? If the man heals, the world changes. And I'll leave it at that.
I love that. This is your call to action, men, to live your best life and put your ego aside and do the hard work of just addressing the stuff that we're all dealing with. You're not broken. Nothing is wrong with you.
Nope.
Stop the generational handoff of baggage and trauma to your kids and what you got from your dad and what he got from his dad or mom or whatever. Be the guy that impacts multiple generations. I mean, that's exciting. I just got chills. Man. Of that legacy, which is important to some men. It's really important to me. That word, have that be your legacy. How exciting would that be? So thank you so much for this conversation, David. It has been a pleasure and an honor.
to have you on the podcast, and I think we're all better men for having you here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andy.